Uh, Here's a company, a national company that runs 50, 60 malls around the country, and they're in the business of making money, and when they pull up stakes and say, hey, we can't make it in Sacramento, does that put a damper on your vision of the downtown?
No, I think it's a very good question. Let's put a little context in it. You know, they've owned that mall since 1998. So you're talking, nearly 12 years. I think all of us feel that that mall has never reached its potential in 12 years. And it leaves a lot to be desired. There was a lot of bad blood, apparently, between Westfield and the city, and I'm not privy to what all took place. Back in August, when I sat down with them, I said, I'd like you to do one of two things. Either invest heavily, like you have in other malls around the country, or sell and don't stand in the way of progress. And they said, we're willing to do that. And that was kind of the first breakthrough moment. But we said we'd take the next 3 or 4 months and see if we can come up with a win-win situation. I said this back then, I'll say it again. If Westfield was not in Sacramento, I would have been doing everything I could to try to bring them to Sacramento. So now that we were here working together, it's like, look, do we have a shared vision? And is the timing, to your point, Westfield has major assets all over the country, all over the world, in fact, major assets, and limited resources in a down economy. Where does Sacramento rank in terms of your priority assets is really what it boiled down to. And for me, it should be the #1 priority. We have one downtown. We have one opportunity to create a regional downtown plaza, and it's right there on JK and L corridor. Their vision might be a little different, and their timing might be different. And I think the good news is they were willing to say, look, we do not want to stand in the way of progress. And if you can find somebody that wants to buy our interest and buy us out, then we're willing to do that at a very reasonable price. I think that is very significant, especially when you look at what took place or what did not take place over the last 12 years.
Mr. Mayor, today we find out that the crime rate in Sacramento, the city, has gone down significantly. And then this morning, double homicide. You were there at the scene. What are your thoughts about this?
I've committed to making public safety a top priority while I was campaigning. Since I've been in office, a little over a year, we have not let up in terms of making public safety a top priority. You know, one of the big wins in year one, and I'm so thankful to council and city staff for helping make this happen, but we were able to get labor concessions when we were trying to put forth a budget for this fiscal year. And by getting labor concessions from police, we were able to maintain the number of police officers that we have on the street. It's not enough, but we didn't lose any. I think that was very significant. With that said, I think our men and women in uniform have been fighting and working tirelessly. And if you take homicides as one category, last year we had 49 homicides, I believe. And if you take where we're at this year in comparison to last year, we're down 40-some-odd%, which is very significant. So I'm pleased with that work. One life lost is too many. Unfortunately, last night there was a double homicide. I've made it a practice and a commitment that when I'm in office, if at all possible, I'm going to go out to the scene of the crime and understand what's going on, because I don't ever want to be out of touch with what happens on our streets. And there's a victim, there's families impacted, there's neighbors that are concerned. Public safety is a primary role of government, is to create a safe and secure environment. Last night was not a good sight for any of us. It was disheartening for a lot of reasons. I hope that homicide gets closed and solved in a quick manner. That would at least allow some peace, but it does not do anything to restore the 2 lives that have been lost. I think my point is, as a mayor, we need to make sure that we maximize the resources we have with public safety. I'm going to do that. I'd like to see more resources put toward public safety, but our men and women in uniform are doing a stellar job with the limited resources that we do have. Ultimately, it boils down to, do people feel safe and secure in our community? And we're ideally not where we'd like to be, even though homicide and crime has went down.
Mayor Johnson,
in certain Can you let me finish my point, man? Please, this is my one moment.
I thought you were finished.
No, go ahead.
Oh, you sure?
Positive.
Your deadline for Sacramento First is what, Christmas Eve or area around there. One of the areas you've been looking at, or that has gotten some buzz, has been Westfield for an arena site. Now you have things potentially changing with only a couple weeks left in your RFO process. Would you consider extending that by a week or so, or a couple of weeks, if it gives folks a chance to get something going there?
Yeah, again, I think good question. So the deadline for proposals to be submitted is December 24th, so right before the holidays. We had heard preliminarily that some developers were looking at the Westfield site. So if they were looking at it, this should enhance their ability to evaluate it, I would think. So I don't think it actually sets anybody back. Because if they wanted to put a proposal forward, they would have had to have a conversation with Westfield regardless. So they may or may not have done that. Now that this property could be one that could be purchased, then that should enhance the ability of a developer to have a conversation with Westfield. So I don't think it slows anything up at this point.
Do you have any time frame? Do you have any time frame for when this sale would take place? And does the city have any tools at its disposal if a sale doesn't happen within that time frame, such as eminent domain, which the city is using on other cases?
Yeah, I think eminent domain is going to be part of this one. I think to your point, there's no time. Today is an update, and it's an update on basically what took place from August through December. I promised the community that we would try to get a decision point before the end of the year. We were able to do that. That's the breakthrough moment. In terms of going forward, it'd be too preliminary to say, here's who a potential buyer is, what is the asking price. That will have to be worked out in private between Westfield and the potential buyer. They'll negotiate that like they do everything else. In terms of timeline, I think coming as soon as we get to the beginning of the year in January, those discussions will start taking place in earnest, in January. And that timeline, it'll be a little too premature ultimately to determine what that is. In terms of the city's role, I think was your last point.
Do you have any tools?
The city has limited resources, but we can facilitate in some cases. We own the parking lot where beneath downtown plaza where there's parking, which is a very valuable asset. In terms of, from my vantage point, I have to protect the retailers that are there. They need to know that the city is extremely committed to reimagining this downtown plaza and helping it reach its potential that we all believe that can occur, that has not occurred. So protecting the retailers is very important for all of us, and letting them know that we're making a good faith effort to create a better environment for them. And I'm thankful for those who have stayed, despite the down economy and the lack of investment that has really taken place. And then secondly, I have a phone conversation today, I believe, and a meeting with the CEO of Macy's, which is out in New York City, because Macy's is a key stakeholder. We talk so much about Westfield and the downtown plaza, we cannot forget Macy's. They're a key stakeholder. So again, my responsibility is to communicate with them that we're going to do everything that we can to create a better environment in downtown plaza and also get their feedback. Let's not forget, we held 2 kind of town halls where we brought businesses and property owners and stakeholders together and got their feedback, and that was very helpful in terms of our conversations with Westfield as well. And again, I think come beginning of the new year, 2010, we'll be able to start articulating a vision of what we would ideally like to see there, and that will form kind of the basis for the dialogue between Westfield and a potential buyer.
Mayor Johnson, I know that Westfield sued the city. If I remember correctly, I think it was competition from the Rail Yards project. I assume that suit would go away now, but do you have concerns that competing development would maybe cause some companies not to necessarily want to come into this downtown market?
No, I don't have a concern on that. I think when I think about our downtown core, that what the rail yards allows us to do is double our downtown.